The Kia E-Niro and the Hyundai Kona Electric. Both electric vehicles, both come from the same place, both are made by the same people. So they're identical, right? Well, maybe not in every respect. So, armed with a tape measure and a full spec sheet on both, let's pick our way around these cars and see where they differ. Morning and welcome to the glorious British countryside where the sun's shining and we've got these two amazing cars which, well, they're that rare in this country at the moment. I'm surprised to see one or the other, let alone two together. And we've got JustEVs to thank for that again. They happen to have had two for sale and well, they very kindly have let me spend the day with them, picking over them and seeing what the difference is between the two of them. So let's start with the front, seeing as we're up here. And well, initially, let's look at the width of both cars because although they're built on the same chassis, the same platform, everything's the same underneath, actually they've both done something a little bit different. So when we look at the width, let's look at my specifications, we can find that the Kona is 5mm narrower. So it's as much as nothing. It's the bodywork that they put on it. So that doesn't really make an awful lot of difference. But let's look at the front of these. So what we see straight away is, for me, the big difference is the headlights. Now on the E-Niro, we don't get an LED option. Now there's only this first edition one available here in the UK at the moment. On the Kona, what we get is the LED option if we want it. And below that we get a variation in how the driving lights are set up. But ultimately, they've done their own thing. They've just molded their bonnets in their own way. What I have noticed is the front of this car, this little bit here where they've covered the grille is quite solid. Here on the Kona, it's like they've put another panel in. So that's molded in where that is an addition. It's like you could clip that in and out if you wanted to. And while I'm touching that, what I also notice is the diamonds on here, they're just lightly cut in. On here, these bits here, they're quite deep cuts. Now, yeah, it might just look cosmetic, but actually if I was cleaning that, I'm thinking from a practical point of view, that's easy to clean and polish. That is a nightmare. You get flies and things stuck in there. Trying to clean it's bad enough, but then polish and things stuck in there, that's going to be a bit of a pain in the backside. If we look at the charging flaps, they open exactly the same way. They're in the same place. They're both CCS chargers. So the whole charging system's the same. They will charge up to 100 kilowatts on a fast charger, CCS charger, and they've got Type 2 for your home charging. Otherwise, in that charging, there's nothing else in the E-Niro. In the Kona, we see some displays here, which basically just show us the charger timing and some details about the battery charging. In the E-Niro, we see a bar up in the windscreen, which, a bit like the Leaf, it tells us the state of charge there. You don't get that in the Kona. Now, before we move around to the side, let's just talk about weights of these cars. So the curb weight of each car, the Kona is 63 kilograms less than the E-Niro, but the Kona has a payload of 3 kilograms more. And to add to that, of course, we're talking about efficiencies. They've both got exactly the same drag coefficient of 0.29. So let's move to the side and have a look from there. So on the side here, when we see them parked like this, they look pretty identical. But if we have a look, the actual length of each vehicle, the Kona is 195 millimeters shorter than the E-Niro. So I guess it does look a little bit more stubby, but I thought that was due to some of the trim on it. But yeah, that surprised me. It is a shorter car. And that transfers also into the wheelbase, and the wheelbase itself is 100 millimeters shorter. So overall, the Kona is shorter and it's narrower, but height-wise, they're both exactly the same. Of course, that's not the whole story. Let's have a look at what they actually look like. And I think it's really clear to see. I appreciate the colours are different. I appreciate that this red is quite striking. But when we actually look down into the nitty-gritty of it, well, there's not an awful lot on the side of the E-Niro to tell you it's an electric car. We know that these wheels are slightly different. They're more aerodynamic, so that's why they're on there. But other than that, there's nothing to tell me that that's an electric car. On here, what we see is the wheels, which are they're more pronounced, I'd say, than the E-Niro. We also see this blue drive badge, so we know that there's something a little bit more eco-friendly about it, because that's what blue means, doesn't it? It's eco-friendly. The rest of the car, well, the trim levels are slightly different, so I wasn't able to get them identical, so you will see some chrome flashes on there where you won't on this one. But both wing mirrors have inbuilt indicators in them. They just pressed the body panels ever so slightly different. They've used slightly different trim. We've got a bit of bit more plastic around the wheels here. I would suggest this looks a little bit more like a soft roader, or edging towards that, where this looks more like it belongs on the road. Don't get me wrong, neither are off-roaders, but that's a feeling I get looking at both vehicles. At the back, we see those styling cues continue. It's very much the conservative and the young whippersnapper, I would say, looking at that. Now, we can see height-wise exactly the same. You can see up here these little bits that cover the aerials and all the GPS bits and pieces. They're the same. This little spoiler here at the top, just covering the top of the windscreen, that's the same on both of them. But that's where the similarities end. The windscreens are different. The whole back end is actually different. And when you look at the clearance it's got, the Kona sits 3 millimeters higher than the E-Niro. So it's not a lot, but it is a little bit higher. And I guess that kind of accentuates that look of it being a little bit more of a soft roader as opposed to a road-going car. What else have we got on the back? Well, we can see the styling cues from the front of the vehicles coming to the back. So these slit rear lights are very much like the ones at the front. On here, I really like this rear light cluster on the E-Niro. The front lights, as I say, no LEDs, but LEDs and the lights are nicely built into the back of this car. I prefer it on this one to this one. The rest of it, well, this carries on with this these black plastic bits over the rest of the paintwork. It gives it that rugged look all round, where this has got this nice sleek, almost executive kind of look. I think probably the colour of the paint helps. I really, wherever I look on this car, these blue flashes, I really don't like them. I think it just looks a bit tacky. That's my opinion of them. But then I think that this electric sign here looks a bit tacky, and I know not everybody agrees with me on that, but they're just personal things. To be honest, overall, the Kona's got a nice round shape to it. It looks a little bit more squat, a little bit more rugged. The E-Niro looks a bit more slab-like. Is probably an unkind way of saying it, but it's flatter across the back, and it doesn't look as fun as the Kona. That's the outside of the car. Let's move to the inside. But what I think while we're here, let's look at the boots first of all, because they're the one thing that people I see all over social media saying there's a big difference in the boot size and how they are. So I've got some suitcases, I've got a tape measure. Let's actually see what they're like inside. So both cars have an all right size boot for a compact SUV. No matter whether it's petrol, diesel, electric, it doesn't matter. These cars aren't renowned for having big boots regardless. So what we find here, the difference between these two is with the E-Niro, it has 0.19 meters square more room in this boot than we have in the Kona. Practically wise, what we see is in the E-Niro, thanks to the JBL sound system in here, we see a sub here on the left as we look into the car. The right hand side, we've got a little cutaway area. It's handy to have those little extra areas around the wheel arch just to stuff things in. Underneath here we see some storage for our chargers and things. In fact, there's plenty of room under there to get all your junk, the sort of stuff that is normally kicking around in the boot, whether it's plastic bags, chargers, anything else, stick them under there, they're out the way. So that's good effective use of space. In the Kona, we see, well, exactly the same, apart from when we look in on the right-hand side, we see the speaker. On the left-hand side, we've got that little cutaway area, and then the floor again lifts up. But this one, well, it's not quite as big. We've got some trays. We could probably just get our charging cables on there, but I've got to be honest, it's looking a bit narrow. But underneath, we've got where, if you don't choose to pay for an extra spare wheel, we've got the wheel well, which gives us loads of space, and you could put all sorts in there. But of course, it's not just about numbers. It's about practicality and how this space actually works. Now this one's got this pull-over bit for the just to protect your belongings, to give you some privacy in the back, where the Kona has a traditional parcel shelf that you'd see in a hatchback that goes up and down with it. Let's get on to the actual practical side. I've got some suitcases. I've got 3 suitcases. They're the sort of suitcases that me and my family, certainly when you've got a wife like mine that likes to travel with everything she owns, sort of things we would take on a family holiday. So 2 large ones and 1 smaller one. So let's start with the rigid one. That can go on the bottom there. Can't go that way in. It's not deep enough, so that goes in there. A softer one on top, so we just lift that cover up, that slides in there. Now that I would say is just about clearing it. Because it's soft, that will be okay. And then the smaller one, well, that one can go on its side in there. And let's see. That shuts fine. So there you go. So you can get certainly 2 large suitcases and a small one in. Plus you've got a little bit of extra room if you want to stuff some coats and other bits and pieces in. That's pretty much the boot in the eNiro. Let's try that in the Kona. So starting with that big one again, see again, that's overhanging at the back. There's no way that's going to go in without parcel shelf on, so let's make it a fair test. Let's take this parcel shelf off. That just pops out. Soft one next on top. See, that is almost the same, but I think that just sticks out a little bit more in this one. And then we've got our space down the side here. Let's have a look. Yeah, that is definitely tighter. And I don't know if you can see very well, the wheels are going into this case. So if this case was really full, I think would struggle with that. But depth-wise, that's fine. So well, let's see if the boot shuts on this one. That's definitely, that's a lot tighter. There's no question about it. No, that's packing it in the same way, that's not going to work. The only other thing I can possibly do, no, I wondered if I could tip it up there, but no. And you can see there's less space here anyway. So so there you go, the eNiro boot is definitely bigger. So let's just confirm that, shall we? So base of the boot from the back of the seat to the lip here is 71 centimeters. Width, the actual usable bit between the wheel arches, is 1 meter and 1 centimeter. So we're 71 by 101. Let's have a look over here. Here we are 77 by 105. So there you go. That is confirmation that the eNiro boot is definitely bigger than the Kona Electric. It's not by a lot, but let's be honest, that amount of luggage isn't unusual for a family to take on holiday with them. And all right, you don't do it every day, but you would be pretty upset if you couldn't get those 3 suitcases in the back of your family car. So on room in the back, definitely the eNiro has it. Let's go inside the car and see how those differences continue. Now we're inside, I just want to point out that actually these are 2 different models as far as the eNiro where it sits and the Kona where it sits. This is a first edition, the eNiro, and there is nothing else available. So we've got things like leather seats and other little nice touches in here that we won't necessarily see in the Kona because that's not a top of the range model. So I'm going to ignore those. What I'm concentrating on is things like the room in here and how it's laid out and what it's like to use practically every day. But before I do that, let's talk about some facts and figures. So both of these cars have a 64 kilowatt hour battery. Interestingly enough, the Kona is from LG Chem. The eNiro is from SK Innovations. Now, it doesn't really mean an awful lot. They both, the usable amount of the battery is what they advertise. Actually, both batteries are a little bit bigger, which is great. Companies are now starting to tell us what we can use from their batteries, not just their overall size, because that was never an accurate guide. And for those of you that are really interested, they both have 294 cells. The Kona has 5 modules and the eNiro only has 3 modules. So if that's something that interests you, there you go. Now, what does all that mean? So as far as how the cars drive, both have 150 kilowatt motors that drive the front wheel. Both have 395 Newton meters of torque, and both have a top speed of 103.8 miles an hour. But 0 to 60, we see the Kona going at 7.6 seconds to 60, and the eNiro 7.5 seconds. So 0.1 of a second. Does it really matter? I've got to be honest. No, because of the type of cars they are, we're not in these to race them around a track. These cars are quite simply family cars, cars to get around in. 0.1 of a second means nothing. So for all intents and purposes, everything that's underneath this car is identical. So let's look at the subtle differences within the car. And as I say, without looking at the niceties, the top of the range kind of things that you get, well, the cabin in this car and the materials used on the whole feel okay. They feel like average quality materials, but they've been very well put together. We've got the screen in the middle, and now the eNiro screen is much bigger, it sits much higher, but the software that's on them is pretty much identical. I've got to be honest. Maybe there's a little bit of a change in colours here and there, but ultimately it's identical. It does the same thing in the same way. The display in front of me, they're both slightly different. They're both digital. They both have all the information on you could need. So then it comes to, well, how are the controls laid out? And again, both vehicles, they're laid out in such a way that they're easy to get to. They're easy to use. Everything's there in front of you. We've got, in this car, we've got a twisty knob basically to select our drive. So we've got reverse, neutral, drive, and I turn the knob and then there's a park in the middle, a button to press. In the Kona, that's all done on buttons. And what I found, both of them, you have to have your foot on the brake in order to engage a different drive mode, whether it's forward or reverse. Now, before we get in the back, let's do some more facts and figures. Let's look at some of the actual the measurements inside this car. So, as far as being inside here in the front, headroom wise, in this eNiro, I've got 15 millimeters more headroom here at the front. Rear headroom, they're exactly the same. They're both 957 millimeters. Now, when I get in the back, I'll show you, but rear leg room, the eNiro has 66 millimeters more rear leg room. So, do you know what, actually, that's quite a decent amount. And of course, it depends on how these front seats are set up, but this is a bigger car all round, there's no doubt about it. So let's get in the back of the Kona and let's see what the differences are between the two. So getting in here, this is the Kona. Now the driving seat is set up the same as the eNiro for me to drive the car. I'm 5'9", so I'm not massive, but obviously you can adjust. If you want to be a bit more sympathetic as a front seat passenger, you can move that forward. So I think this is a better demonstration of what it's like to be in the back. And do you know what? Having these two cars next to each other, you can really see the difference, what those few extra centimeters make. And, I do feel, yeah, okay, I could sit here, but my feet are underneath. My knees are almost touching that. In fact, if it wasn't for these cutout bits in the back of the seat, I'd pretty much be touching that seat. Headroom wise, it's all good. There's nothing there to be concerned about. If I close the door, it's comfortable. I can move that head restraint up and down, but it's tight. I wouldn't want to spend an awful lot of time sat back here. I feel quite cocooned in. It's not bad, but having done the same in the eNiro, which I'll show you, you just feel it's more airy, it's more light. It feels much nicer in the back of that car. So here you really can see those differences, can't you? Look, my knees are so much further away. Yeah, my feet are a little bit under, but I've got plenty of room here. Headroom's the same. It just feels a bit more open, a bit more spacious. I think also because in the Kona, the screen comes up at the front. It closes everything down. I think perhaps everything in the middle is a little bit higher. I don't feel quite as claustrophobic back here. Not that it was bad in the Kona, but everything just feels a little bit more open, even with all this black leather. Now, the final thing I wanted to do before we sum up at the end is just have a look under the bonnet. And I've got to be honest, they look almost identical. Yeah, there's some fluid bits and pieces in different areas, but ultimately they're exactly the same, right down to the cover. Now, if we lift the cover off, underneath what we find is, well, again, exactly the same units underneath both of these covers. So there you go, two compact SUVs that have completely changed the way that people look at the electric vehicle market. We've been after these for a long, long time because this is what people are buying at the moment. SUVs, not the big ones, the ones that we can use in and around the town. To have two of them available with incredible range, real world, they're well over 250-mile cars, is just brilliant. The only downside, well, you try and buy one, you're in excess of a 12-month wait for both of these new at the moment. But if you do happen to be fortunate enough to have the choice, well, which one do you go for? They've both got their pros and cons. At the end of the day, everything underneath these cars is exactly the same. So there's marginal differences here or there. So it really is around your life preferences and what you want out of your car. Now, personally speaking, if I was to buy one of these, then I would have to go towards the eNiro. I've got 2 young children. I need that extra space. It doesn't matter what else I think, that one would accommodate us. This one would be too small for us. But if I took them out of the equation, I just wanted to buy one of these cars, I would opt for the Kona. I think it's a much more fun looking car. I think it feels much more modern inside. I think everything about it is just more up to date than the Kia. I think the Kia it's a grown-up car. It does the right things in the right places. It doesn't excite me. Well, it makes me feel like I'm a little bit younger than the 40-something years that I am. And for that reason, I would go with this Kona every time. But that's the choice for you. You need to, if you can, test drive both these cars and then make your own decision. What best fits into your own family lifestyle. So there you go. Hopefully that's something I've been wanting to do for a long time and you've been wanting to see. It's done now. If you want to know any more about either of these cars, let me know. Or get in touch with JustEVs, who have very kindly provided both these cars today. I'll put their website address in the description below. They've got all manner of very nearly new and used electric vehicles. Give them a call. If they haven't even got it on the website, the chance are they can probably get hold of something for you. They're very, very good. So a big thank you to them. And that's it for today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, remember to like and share. If you're not doing so already, subscribe to the channel. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at EVOpinion. And if it is something you'd like to do to support the channel, have a look at the Patreon link. But until next time, you take care and I will see you soon. Take care.